Hey, what's up y'all? The video got cooking up is gonna take a little while longer, so I just wanted to give y'all something to play in the background for the time being. So with that being said, if you want to see more Icarus Uprising videos, like and subscribe, and all that good stuff. So today, we're going to be talking about the hypothetical scenario where we get the Icarus Uprising remake on the Switch 2. Emphasis on the hypothetical because we're probably going to be waiting another decade for another game, depending on what Sakurai is working on after Kirby Air Riders. Alright, so let me get this off my chest. The Wii U was the best console for a port. And the main reason I say this is because of all the controller options you had. Pro controller for twin stick action, check. Arguably better motion controls, check. A controller with the second screen you can control with the stylus, check. Since the main problem that most people had with this game was its control scheme, this way you could satisfy most people. It would be kinda awkward looking down at the Wii U gamepad, but honestly I don't think it would have been too bad. Icarus Uprising was developed on the Wii at one point, so with my non-existent knowledge of game development, I don't think it would have been too much of a challenge. It definitely didn't help that the Wii U sold like 5 units and Sakurai was busy with Smash 4 for a long time. But let's move on and talk about the Switch 2. The Switch 2 obviously doesn't have a gamepad like the Wii U, which I think is fine, because there's the next best thing, the mouse controls with the new Joy-Cons. The control scheme of Icarus Uprising had you controlling the reticle with the stylus, which was pretty much a bootleg mouse control setup. It was definitely very weird when I first picked up the game, but as I got more adapted to it, the touchscreen controls felt incredibly fluid. Now, what I'm about to say is probably going to have people argue in the comments, but personally, I did not like Splatoon's motion controls. I don't know what it is, but it just never felt natural to me, and funny enough, kinda hurt my wrists trying to get it to work, not gonna lie. But getting back on topic, the mouse controls on the Switch 2 should be more precise than that weird motion control setup that Splatoon had. I just wish they had someone that's more familiar with aiming on the mouse. During that Metroid playtest they had at Nintendo Treehouse this year, because the person they had on was doing a really bad job at showing it off. So that being said, I'm definitely glad we didn't get the game on the Switch 1, not gonna lie. But that's also gonna lead into the next point, which is game performance. Now, I have no doubt the Switch 1 could have handled this game since Sakurai is a magician at making games, but the Switch 1 was capped at 60 FPS, or frames per second. But let's be real here, let's be dead ass. Most games on that system were definitely not reaching that all the time while they were docked, let alone if you were playing on handheld mode. If there's one thing you have to give props to Uprising, it definitely has to be its steady performance. At least in story mode, I've definitely never experienced any frame drops, which is honestly impressive for how good the visuals are for a 3DS title. The multiplayer though, that's kind of a different story, but it's understandable for how much things that can just be on screen all at once. But moving on, the Switch 2 is capable of outputting 120 FPS when it's playing games in 1080p or 1440p, according to Nintendo's own website. Now that probably won't mean much to anyone who hasn't experienced it for themselves, but for a shooter, the more frames the better, since you're getting a lot more information every second, which would make the multiplayer for this game, hell, pretty much the whole game, even more enjoyable, because you'd be able to better track targets, and you'd be able to see projectiles flying at you a lot better than you could compared to the 3DS version, and would overall make this an even more enjoyable third-person shooter. Honestly, Sakurai could release this game with the same graphics as the 3DS, and I'd be happy as long as the game always stayed at 120 frames per second, but that's just me. Also, a quick side note, the Switch 2 has a built-in Ethernet port, so that means I'd be pulling a low-tier god and banning anybody that doesn't have an Ethernet connection, and ban anybody using Wi-Fi. But nah, I'm playing. But this is one less excuse for people still using Wi-Fi for multiplayer games in the modern age. But moving on, there's the elephant in the room, and that is the lack of a second screen. This has to be the biggest what-if question about this game getting a remake, because the game did a pretty good job at displaying a lot of things at once without the top screen heads-up display looking crowded. In a way, Sakurai was ahead of the TikTok 50-50 video trend because you had to deal with monsters on the top screen while getting distracted by the conversation happening on the bottom screen. But to really illustrate the problem we have here, let me just show you what I mean.
Hurry, Pit!
What's the matter?
Medusa has brought the fight to our realm. Her forces are invading Skyworld.
She must be getting back at us for taking down Dark Lord Gao.
Medusa's venom knows no bounds, but I know you can stop her underworld army.
Bruh, you see what I mean? This is kind of annoying for an action game like this. And for multiplayer, this problem is amplified to the max because what the hell am I supposed to be looking at right now? Sakurai definitely has a lot of things to figure out with this, especially since he prided himself on not pausing the action of Kid Icarus Uprising while still keeping the story going smoothly. But anyways, let's move on to the last thing I want to touch on, that being StreetPass. I've definitely talked about this issue before in a previous video, but that aside, for some weird design reason, the Switch 2, despite being a portable console, doesn't have StreetPass. I guess it would have made the already expensive console even more expensive, but price aside, it definitely feels like a missed opportunity for anybody that actually hauls their Switch wherever they go. But anyways, StreetPass was pretty much the only consistent way of getting completely perfect weapons in Kid Icarus Uprising, because it enabled you to fuse weapons without losing the 2 weapons used for fusion. So unless Sakurai vastly overhauls the fusion system to be more forgiving, losing StreetPass gems is gonna suck pretty bad for anybody that wants better weapons faster. So that wraps up today's video. I'm in the process of moving, so I apologize if it takes a while for another main video to come out, but hopefully it won't slow me down too much. The next main video is going to be pretty important for the channel since it's going to be a blueprint for longer guide videos. But with that being said, I will be seeing you all in the next one. Peace.